forward to trying to give you a little bit of an overview of, running your staffing firm like you're about to sell it. We are seeing this as a very large issue this year in the staffing industry. We are probably currently working on about 5 deals that people who 6 months ago told us they had no intention of ever selling or even being engaged to sell their staffing firm. So, when David asked me to talk about this, I thought it'd be really good to kind of give you guys some objectives of, what are some of the different valuation methodologies out there. And it's going to be a short course because this course in 20 minutes is not something that's easy to do. But we're also going to talk about what are some of those considerations you need to look at on a yearly basis. And then what does it mean, when someone says to you, hey, what do we got to have from a balance sheet and a cash flow strength? What is really needed in order to build the value of my company if I decide to sell it? One of the things I always found interesting was many of you may have watched the show on Max, our favorite show, Succession. And I always like to talk about that a little bit before I start into this, because that's really what happens in life. A lot of people think that, they have all this time in the world, that at some point in time when they, turn 75 or 80, they'll probably turn the company over to their kids. Or maybe, the big payday is going to come out. They never really think about what's going to happen and when do they plan on selling the business. It's just, it's your child. You started it, you start building it, you start growing it. And then all of a sudden, something like Succession happens where, the owner passes away and 3 or 4 children are set to go and the whole world falls apart. I've been doing this for 38 years. And I can tell you that when you put a piece of a dollar bill on a table, the entire structure changes for everybody. Family is not family, and everybody has a different model of what they would like to do. But if you can start early and you start positioning yourself to understand what needs to be done in order to maximize that value, it's going to help you, tremendously. So, there are a couple different things that when you're looking at evaluation, from methodologies, 3 really different type of methodologies that we like to use in our world. And one of those is called the comparable company analysis. Basically, you're taking your business and you are comparing your business and utilizing what the public market has done. What are the trading multiples that are happening out there? So many times what you're going to hear from many people is, they're selling between 3 to 5 times EBITDA, or they're selling at 2 times revenue. Those are all things that are coming from the marketplace. What you're hearing is people who compare themselves to the marketplace. They're looking at a public company and they're saying, well, if my EBITDA is $5 million and it's going at 3 times EBITDA is what I've been hearing, that means my company is worth 15 million. That is not necessarily what's going on, but it's a good starting point. Because many people are what we call privately held family-owned businesses, or they could even be owned by, PE funds, that multiple, that public market valuation really varies up and down depending on multiple things that we'll get into in a few minutes. The next step that a lot of people look at is what's called the precedent transaction analysis. Basically, you're looking at values on what were paid in multiples on common organizations like yours. Now, that really can distort the deal-specific issues because you, us, any investment banker, any public accountant, anybody working with you is not going to know what the true intricacies are of that deal. There could have been, multiple partners in there where they had who were not even, what I would call, minority partners. They could have just been investors. That can change the entire deal on what the multiple is. You don't know if they're doing payroll processing and are they doing staffing. You may not know what their sales mix looks like. So whenever we do a transactional specific valuation, it really becomes it is a guess. It's a dartboard because you're comparing organizations that will have various, and I mean various, multiples. I have seen some organizations where they have sold for 1 times revenue, but it was actually 27 times a multiple of their EBITDA. Well, that's because that was a strategic deal. It was not a finance deal. So it's you got to really understand that a transactional analysis may not be what's best for you when you're looking at valuation. And then the last valuation that's done is what we call the discounted cash flow analysis. That is where most businesses will start when they are trying to figure out, what the value of their business is. You're looking at a present value of projected free cash flows. So yes, it is utilizing long-term assumptions, forecasts, projections, but it is pulling what we call an intrinsic value of the business. You're looking at something that says, look, if I know that my business revenue has been consistently growing 5 to 6% per year, I know my cost structure is 2 to 3% per year increase, and I know my EBITDA and my free net cash flow is consistently growing 2 to 3%, then you know that you can absolutely create a cash flow model that gives you a really good value on what you will be delivering to a potential buyer. Now, what you will see is that all 3 of these methods should be used as you are coming up to determine what a value is. And the reason you look at all 3 is because all 3 of these should be within a few percentage points of each other. Even though a public company may have a higher multiple, they may not have the cash flow you have. So by doing yours on a discounted cash flow model, you may see that you end up with a much higher dollar amount than somebody who may have a higher sales than you, but a smaller cash flow. And so I think it's important that we first understand how values are assigned and how buyers actually assign values to a business before they actually walk into your door. The other issue you have to look at, and what we just talked about, is, things that are impacting value. There's 3 specific types that impact your value of a business. You have strategic, you have operational, and you have financial. And each one of those is going to increase or decrease the value of your business. Strategic is where, you have a really defined customer exposure. That customer relationship is extremely entrenched. Perhaps you're sitting in a hospital and perhaps you're only doing one division within a hospital, but the person looking to buy you sees it as a growth opportunity that they could explode into all divisions within a hospital and therefore create much more volume and greater gross margin for the organization as a whole. In addition, you could also be looking at something where you, as perhaps you're a VMS, you have the ability to actually create intrinsic value strategically for a buyer because you have insight into various customers across the country that maybe they do not. And so those enhanced and entrenched customer relationships is what really helps drive the visibility of the value of your business. It also is important to note that let's say that you are in hospitality and you are sitting in a state that does not have a tremendous amount of hospitality staffing, and there's some type of fund out there or some type of large hospitality group that may be might be very strong on the East Coast, but they're not strong on the Midwest or in the West Coast. And they see you as an opportunity to strategically enter a marketplace and start building a new platform in that region. That's where strategically you're going to get a better value. There is less of a competition for the buyer, but there's a huge upswing for that buyer. The next value proposition is operational. Operationally, is your business operating on a very strong track record? Are your gross margins consistently the same? Do you have the same leadership in place? Do you have the same end-to-end relationships with your customers and also with your internal teams, meaning that does your office location in one city operate the same as another location in another city? And then also, what is the contract duration? If you have really good contracts and you are literally placing people over and over and over again inside that customer, operationally, you're churning that number. You, the buyer, and you can continue to churn that dollar inside that organization. And so it allows them to know that they're not going to have to spend a tremendous amount of dollars bringing in a whole new management team, bringing in a whole new strength of lower management, because that's where a lot of times you will see a lot of the smaller style staffing firms. They may not have as much low level management, but they got great management at the top. And so operationally, it's going to literally reduce the value of the organization. And then the last thing that really does impact the factor, and this is where we're going to spend some more time on, is really on your financial data. What are your historical trends looking like? What's your forecast, your backlog, your visibility? What is the margin by customer? What is your organic growth and your inorganic growth? One of the things that a lot of buyers have been looking at lately is organic growth. What they're looking at is if they see an organization that's grown 35, 40% over the last couple of years, they're going to want to understand, was that organic growth? Or was that actually inorganic growth where you were buying a lot of companies and you have not yet integrated them to be able to start exploding with the organic growth and driving those synergies that they're looking for? In addition, one thing that everybody misses on the financial, which does tie to the operational, is what we call the capital expenditure. Is your back office system, is your marketing system, is your advertising system, is your ATS system, is your delivery system, are all those systems all integrating, and are they working together? And have you transformed the organization? What are you looking at? Jeff was just talking about AI as I logged in, and what are your costs going to be for AI? All those things have to be looked at when they're valuing your company, because they will 100% have a reduction in the value of that company. And then one of the things that we always like to look at is what provides value contraction and what provides value enhancement. And by that, I mean, let's say the average cap rate is 4 times. So what is going to take it down to 3? And what is going to take it up to 5 or 6? Well, a contraction issue that you will see is going to be limited service offerings, limited size EBITDA numbers, low margin, very, very limited operational leverage. You're in a small geographical presence, and then there's really no growth opportunities for anybody to buy you. So when you have those things, you got to look at your business and you got to say, okay, what do I need to do so that I can get my multiple up? And this is why we discuss the different valuation methods, because you want to be more on the value enhancement approach. Am I a diversified service offering? Do I provide IT and healthcare and light industrial? Do I provide something that is unique? I have a very good staffing firm in the Texas area. They are very focused and they are very narrow in their service offering. They only go into hospitals and they only go into emergency rooms, and they will do nothing else in that hospital. And the reason is that they are really good at it, and they can produce the staff, and they can have the people there within the time frame that's been offered to them. And that has driven their value up. What it's also done is it diversified their customer offering, because now they've been able to go into multiple hospitals in the area and really drive that value by saying, look, we only focus here and we charge a premium for that because we are the ones that can service and deliver. In addition, can you expand that EBITDA platform? If I am a buyer and I look at your organization and I can see that your platform can deliver to me 3, maybe 4, times EBITDA. And all of a sudden, by adding you on to my platform, it's going to drive my EBITDA up another 2 or 3. That's what we're looking for. They also want to make sure if you're having strong, sustainable margins. And by that, I mean your margins can't be fluctuating by 3 or 4 percentage points every year. Your margins need to be sticking consistently within what the industry average is. So if I'm looking at an IT staffing firm, what we look at when we're looking to acquire staffing firms for our clients, I'm looking for someone in the 23 to 25% margin range on an average 3-year run, meaning that for the last 3 years, they've been running that gross margin consistently. But I'm also going to drive down a little bit more in the sales mix, because what I want to make sure of is that I'm not buying something that has 32% margins. And because of the sales mix, that's only 10% of my overall volume. And that really means my margin is below 23. So we got to dig a little deeper on that as well. Then you got to look at, from your management team. What most people don't understand is that the stronger the management team, the stronger the value enhancement does come into play. You want to make sure that when you are building your business, you want to build that leadership team, that leadership team can take over for you. The one area that we focus with all our clients on is constantly talking to them about, look, you have to replace yourself. You cannot be a one woman or one man show, because when you are a one woman, one man show, a buyer actually contracts your value due to that. As you build infrastructure, that infrastructure should be building an ROI. And when you build that ROI, that is shown to the buyer, and they start growing your value, and they start positioning it that, this company can really help us grow. We don't have to dump a lot of money in it. We don't have to bring in new people. We can buy this and we can keep running it. And now we can do what we do best by helping them grow. Now, one of the things that we always want everyone to do on a yearly basis, and this ties back to the value. That is why I was really pushing hard on the overall value of the business and what are the valuation methodologies there, is that the financial statements, the actual financial statements that you are driving every single month need to be done every single month. You need to either be considering having a yearly reviewed financial statement or nothing short of what I call a yearly compilation financial statement. You do not need a what I would call a how do I want to call this? An audit. I don't like using the word audit because a lot of people don't understand what a full-blown audit is. But a full-blown audit for a company of your size does not need to be completely done. And a reviewed financial will get what you're looking for. But what that means is that you have got to be able to have what we call good detailed monthly income statements and good detailed monthly balance sheets. You want those financial statements to be clean. You want to have at least 3 years of good, solid financial statements that have been looked at and have some sort of opinion on them with footnotes for a buyer. So if you are someone that's saying, look, I know I'm never going to sell, my finance company I use doesn't really need reviewed financial statements, what I am telling you is that it is better to have those reviewed financial statements on a yearly basis, because what they do is they drive a consistent approach to a buyer. The buyer knows that you have taken a serious, hard look at your financials. You've invested in an outside group of people to come in and prepare that financial correctly. In addition, they know that in order to do a reviewed financial, that means your data that you're providing to them on a monthly basis is probably really good. Because in order to get to that review, somebody needs to know what they're doing inside your organization. We also recommend is that you take a look at your general ledger detail. As business owners, none of us are what I would call the C personality, where we want to drive into the details. We look at it from a 50,000 foot level. I would recommend that on at least a quarterly basis, you're just taking a scan through the general ledger. You want to have an idea of what's in there. Why? Because sometimes many of those expenses are literally the add backs that are needed for calculating your adjusted EBITDA. And you will lose sight of it if you are not looking at your general ledger on at least a quarterly basis. You also want to make sure that you are preparing on a monthly basis operating metrics. There are so many staffing firms that I first talked to that I will ask them, give me your gross margin by employee, give me your gross margin by customer, give me your gross margin by region, give me your sales the same way. And they cannot produce that. Almost all that information is literally sitting in somebody's back office and or ATS system. And that information is the most important information that a business owner should be looking at, because sales mix has a huge impact on gross margin analysis on a quarterly basis. Gross margin has a huge impact on your recruiter's commission you're paying them. Those are the things that you need to have your hand on every single month, every single quarter, so that you know, am I being consistent? Do I need to relook at it? In addition, how many of you actually take a look at your financial statement and break it down between divisions or service offerings? I have seen so many financial statements where we go in and we start the process of building the valuation to take a company to market. And what we discover is that 80 to 85% of that business was payroll. And that payroll margin was, say, 12%. However, the staffing division was the largest portion of the revenue with great margin. But the problem is I have this small little piece of payrolling that perhaps they don't want to buy. Now that's going to change the whole value of the organization, because it was buried in their financial statement. So when the buyer looks at you, they look at that data and they go, wow, that's a great gross margin. We're going to give you what we call 5 to 6 times your EBITDA. The problem becomes, as they go through that due diligence, they start ripping apart because they're looking for what we call a retrade. They want to make sure that they don't pay you 6 times. They only want to pay you 3 times. And that helps them get there because your data hasn't been put together correctly. So I recommend that again, on a monthly basis, that you're constantly looking at these financial statements. You're looking at what I call management adjustments. You have got to make sure that management adjustments are understood. What are those management adjustments? You want to make sure you're keeping tabs of, is my shareholder compensation overpaid? Is my commissions higher than normal? Did I have to pay extra for, an implementation, a digital transformation? A deal we just did last year, we had also helped them do their digital transformation. It was a very, very large add back, and we were able to add it back to EBITDA, and they were able to get 4.5 times that transformation cost they paid, because of the fact that the buyer wasn't going to have to pay that transformation. But more importantly, because it was an add back, it took my EBITDA from, say, $1 million and it took it to $1.3 million. So on $300,000, they got an additional $1.2 million in their sales price. That's why these management adjustments, you want to keep them consistent. To give you an overview of EBITDA, I believe everyone on the call understands, and I've used it a couple times, but EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That is what the buyer is buying. They're buying that EBITDA. And anytime you can get that EBITDA up, all you're doing is putting more dollars in your pocket every time. So understanding the add backs that need to be added back. Let's say you're paying rent to yourself, and let's say that rent is higher than average in the area you're in. You get to add that back, because every dollar of add back is multiplied by the multiple that you are getting on your deal. Leadership team and cash flow are probably the two most important of these four considerations on a yearly basis. Leadership team, we've already talked about it a lot. I'm going to stress it even more. It makes sense to have qualified people who understand your industry and who really are held accountable. Holding somebody accountable as a leader is the most important thing you can do in your business, because as that leader is driving these results, that is proving to a buyer that you have invested in the organization to drive the organization. We don't have to buy you. We get to buy the organization. You were smart enough to know that the organization is what you're selling, not yourself. And that's extremely important. Remember that comment. The organization is what's being bought, not the individual who owns it. And obviously, cash flow. You guys, every week you should be looking at your cash flow, whether it's a 2-week cash flow or a 13-week cash flow. You want to be looking at that cash flow every single week. It's something that should be done, needs to be done every week. We always work on what we call a 13-week cash flow for our clients. We want to make sure that every 13 weeks they have an idea of where their cash flow is going and how it's going to get there. And that's the cash flow strength that you need. Financial reviews are important. We talked about that. The cash flow model, the 13-week model, helps you understand where you're going to run short on cash over a 13-week period. It allows you to plan. But what most people miss is they forget about the accruals. They forget about the worker compensations. They forget about the sick pays that now 6 states have. They forget about the PTO that 5 or 6 states have now added. All those items need to be accrued. And while many people say, well, by the end of the year, it'll be gone, doesn't matter. If I come in as a buyer and I offer to buy you on whatever, let's just say May 31st, you might have sick pay and accrued pay, PTO pay, that could be a couple $1 million. That's going to affect your balance sheet. So you have to be accruing every staffing related item on a weekly basis or monthly basis that make sure it hits that balance sheet so that liability is on there. One of the items we do is always make sure that when we walk in and we review your work on a monthly basis, we go through a quick checklist, whether it's the CPA firm or whether it's our corporate advising team coming in, and we have a list of about 9 or 10 accruals. And I can tell you that for no lie, 85% of the staffing firms we prospect to, they do not have 80% of the accruals that need to be on a balance sheet. As a buyer, I love that. If I'm helping a client of mine buy a company, I love it because I already know I'm about to buy this company for almost zero or pennies, because their value that they think they have from EBITDA is way off, because they're missing 20 to 30% of the accruals that need to be put back on there, which again will drive my EBITDA number. And as I talked about from the cash flow, we always look at it, and I want all of you to focus on sales by customer, look at your gross profit analysis, look at your sales mix analysis. If you're not in line with benchmarkings, you really need to get in there. We are very fortunate. We use a product called ProfitSense. It gives us data from every single staffing firm across the country that is real live data, because it is tax return data or reviewed/audited financial data. So when I look at someone's gross margin, I'm looking at it compared to theirs in their region. Dave, I'm starting to get the time, correct? I was looking at my clock.
We're about 5 over, but you started late, so I gave you a lecture. But if you need a minute or two to wrap up,
I just need 1 minute or two to wrap up.
You got
it. As I told David, guys, when he asked me to do this, I said, you want me to talk about how to get your business ready for sale in 20 minutes or less? I'm not McDonald's. I'm not a fast food restaurant, but I'm doing my best. So this is what I always like to leave this and one more slide that I like to leave everybody with. Your organization is somewhere in the business in the journey. You're either a growth organization, you're either just managing the organization, or you're in a transition where you're maybe, giving it to your child or giving it to management, or you're in a transformational process where you are transforming and you're going to blow your company up. Depending on where you are in this cycle really depends on how that buying's going to go. And my last slide is, you guys, you don't have as much time as you think. Owners always lose track of time. And when they lose track of time, everything I just went through to try and get all that cleaned up is not an easy task when that person walks in and says, hey, I've had enough, I want to retire. Or worse yet, that owner passes away unexpectedly and management's left with nothing, and the family literally says, what do we do? The value of that business literally just unfortunately took a 30% reduction because the man or woman who ran it is no longer there. Dave, I appreciated it. I don't know if there's any questions, but I'm here to answer those as well. Dave, you're on mute.
Yep, none right now, but that came in. But this is a lot of really good information. Jerry, if people do have questions as a follow-up, because I can understand not wanting to ask questions publicly here, what's the best way to reach you?
Yep, there you go. There's my direct line. Oops, I didn't put that on the screen. Sorry, hold on, it's right. Right there. There you go. Did it come through?
It's there. It's up. Good. Yeah. Thank you.
Good.
This is a lot of really great stuff. I apologize. We don't have more time to go through all that. I know that was a big ask to everything to prep your company for sale. But the reason why I asked Jerry to be on this is a lot of you said it at the end. A lot of people don't start planning till it's too late, or till they've lost their enthusiasm for the business, and then it's trending down. And now the buyer, instead of seeing this trend up that I want to buy the future, is seeing a trend down and saying, this is a distressed asset. I'm going to try to buy it for a discount. I had a guy I knew in graduate school. His dad passed away our first year of graduate school. It was a manufacturing business. He had to drop out of UPenn to go home and run it because he was being offered 30 cents on the dollar of its valuation. From his yep. strategic competitors who wanted to help the family out.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I mean, Dave, I agree with you. I have a great example of a client that we sold 2 years ago during the pandemic that I actually started working with them 6 years ago to get to that point. They were never going to sell for 15 years, but we started working 6 years ago and building all the things I just went over. We actually implemented, built incentive plans. And I have a whole example. I just didn't get time to go through it, but they ended up waking up because of the pandemic saying, it's time for me to go. I can't do it anymore. I'm overtired. I need to sell. Because of all those things we put into place, we doubled the value of the company when she sold.
Wow.
It's a phenomenal example of what can happen when you do it right. And like you, I got many that I can tell you were sold on pennies on the dollar.
And this is one, like you're talking for people, millions of dollars. You're talking to people, they're, for most entrepreneurs, the biggest asset they have in their lives is their business. And, you don't want to suddenly and unexpectedly have that asset crash in value because you didn't plan ahead and you weren't running the business thinking about the future.
Yep. And I see a couple people asking for the slides, and I did send them to you, David, so they will have them.
And just it's been come up all day long, but we'll be putting all these up. All the slides will be available. You'll all get notifications in about a week when everything is cut up. All right, Jerry. Well, I'll let you stop sharing, and then thank you very much. I think we're going to have you back to get into some of these details because I know there were stuff we skipped, and there were a lot of technical good questions starting to come in. So we'll save it for the future. But thank you very much today.
Yep. Thank you guys. And great being on. I appreciate it much. Take care.